Peace and blessings, everyone. It's me, Dr. Sabrina, and welcome to Soul Speak Conversations for Your Healing Journey. And I want to begin by thanking you, all of you that have submitted questions, both for me and very often from my guests. And today we are blessed to have a guest who is actually a former classmate of mine. Let me pause and introduce her and read a little bit of her bio. This is Dr. Monica Buchanan. Monica is an author, a psychotherapist, a coach, and an educator. She holds a PhD in psychology with a concentration in integrative health studies from Saybrook University in California. That's where we were classmates. She has an MA from Simon Fraser University in Vancouver and a BA from Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. She's a certified life and wellness coach, and her life and wellness coaching practice uses a coactive approach where the client and the coach are involved in a creative partnership within a healthy, supportive, and validating environment geared towards growth, empowerment, and transformative change. Dr. Monica's career in human services spans over 4 decades. She's had extensive training in the areas of trauma and recovery, resiliency, group therapy, brief intervention, grief, loss, end of life counseling, women's empowerment coaching, conflict resolution, building self-esteem and confidence, violence against women and girls, sexual violence, critical incident stress debriefing, managing PTSD, coping with diagnosis and loss of health, diversity, and race relations. Her life and passion has always been toward the development of strength-based psychological and community resources for women and youth from marginalized and underserved communities who are dealing with all the isms: racism, poverty, disability, immigration adjustment, homelessness, and criminality. Her research includes the areas of feminization of poverty and coping with autoimmune-based invisible chronic illnesses with a specialized focus on systemic lupus, and she's going to say that last word for me, erythematosus.
Mycosis.
Erythematosis. Thank you. She's going to tell you some more about that. Although semi-retired, Buchanan now spends most of her time writing and gardening. However, she still finds time to provide pro bono therapy for NIA fellows, and she's going to tell us more about that as well. So the question of today is also a continuation of the question that we had when my beloved friend Husna Mokhtar was here. So Husna answered the question based on her experiences and her knowledge. And the woman who submitted the question listened very intently and then added another question. So it's so relevant because that first part is relevant to so many women. And the second part is relevant to a whole nother set of women. And that Venn diagram is what we're going to, that Venn in the middle is what we're going to explore today. So I'm going to read the question again, and I'm going to read the addendum again. So the question is, Dear Dr. Sabrina, I'm a 45-year-old mother of 3 who is at the tail end of a 20-year marriage. To this day, I'm taking the blame for my children who believe the marriage ended because I didn't understand their father. They do not know that my husband was physically and emotionally abusive and that I left to save my life. Even though I know I did the right thing for my family, I'm tired of the burden of silence and protecting my abuser. And sometimes when I'm alone, I also question myself. What do I do? And how do I help my whole family heal? And then the same author wrote later to me that she is now struggling with lupus and wonders, is there a correlation between the two? So this very heavy question with so many layers, my beloved guest, Dr. Monica, and I are going to attempt to answer for this beautiful soul. Thank you, Dr. Monica. Welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Sabrina, for having me. It's lovely to see you and be with you today.
Yes, and we matching too. We didn't even know.
Okay.
so
So,
so this woman's question is very, very common. And I was just wondering, just based on what you heard, what would be your first response to her?
well, I am so thankful that she chose to leave that situation. I can only speak from my own lived experiences and my background. I did research because I was diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus when I was 29.
Oh, you said you did me search.
Yes,
I
because
love that word.
after the
Yes.
diagnosis, I was in graduate school. I was in my master's program, and I was doing poverty research, an area that I'm really committed to and was in love with. But then, because of my challenges in doing my master's degree, I decided I wanted to look further into systemic lupus erythematosus. And of course, the author, the person who writes him, would probably know this. This is age old, but it affects more women than men, and it affects women of color, predominantly Black women,
Mm,
Asians too, but Black women a lot.
mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of research out there, but I'm going to throw into this at the risk of being booed that I honestly believe there's a correlation between stressors, and my research showed that to some extent. But the stress that we experience in relationships, a
Mm,
lot in intimate relationships, somehow I cannot say cause lupus, but from what we know about systemic lupus is that there is a genetic predisposition. There's a lot
mhm,
of theories, but most commonly accepted. And who is to tell that those genetic factors wouldn't stay dormant if we weren't put in high stress situation? And so in my own research, I interviewed women, Black women from
mhm,
different parts and Seattle area, and Washington State, and they all had a story with some element of trauma. There was a young woman; she couldn't really point to a specific traumatic event, but the other participants could. And so, in answer to the question, it's not, I don't have the definitive, because science is, lupus is a disease with a thousand faces and a lot of theories.
Well, that would make sense. So what you're saying is that women, particularly Black women, may have a genetic predisposition for it, but it gets activated after a significant life stressor or a series of significant life stressors.
That came out quite a bit in my research.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But can you tell? I know that this woman that wrote the question probably knows what her symptoms are, but can you tell those of us that might be listening just what it means to have this invisible, what did you call it? An
Invisible
invisible
chronic
chronic illness?
illness.
Please, can you tell us more about what that means?
So, of course, systemic lupus erythematosus is um, it's one of the autoimmune disease that is seem to be common but most difficult to diagnose.
Mm-hmm.
And the manifestation looks different for different people. But some of the common ones are kidney, involvement of kidney, heart, brain, but it's a systemic disease, so it affects every system. So,
Mm.
you could be your eyes, some person might go blind, and kidney failure, and pericarditis, it's a heart-related disease that's commonly found in people with systemic lupus. And the one I discovered on my own lived experience,
Mm.
and about 5 years ago, I knew about it, but I didn't pay attention to it. But I was forced to pay attention is lupus nephritis, and so that is when it's in the brain involvement, brain and spinal cord involvement. So
Really?
there's lots of other systems. Even people with systemic lupus may have symptom of discoid lupus, where you have the butterfly rash, or may have both. So but lots of pain, fatigue. So those are common symptoms. It's a very painful condition, and fatigue and inflammation or rashes. Those are some of the common symptoms.
So how do you, because I've seen many clients who have also been diagnosed with lupus, and I have a colleague that has looked at lupus and other chronic illnesses, but she specifically told me that the emotional underpinning of lupus is an idea that life has been hard. So I'm sharing that with you because you're absolutely validating some more research that's out there around it. And so you're a therapist, you're not a physician. So how do people like us support women who have been diagnosed with this illness? And also, well, there's two parts to the question. How do we support them when they've been diagnosed? And how do we support them when they need to get help and they've been dismissed? Because that also happens to us.
So my research looked at coping strategies. So I
Mhm.
spoke to women. Some were newly diagnosed, and some were living with the condition for a while. So
Mhm.
there's a myriad of coping strategy, how people cope. And of course, they all do the best that they can. People do the best that they can in this disease. Some of the challenges that, especially living in America, as you probably, well, I'm Canadian who moved to the US just about 7 years ago, but I did my studies in the US as a Canadian because I had done pilot studies in Canada, and I realized for the richness that I was looking for, I wouldn't find, because we have a very strong social system that, there is always disability for conditions like that. And also we have universal health care. So even I had done 4 pilot studies looking at autoimmune based conditions, I wouldn't find what I believed. I wouldn't find the research wouldn't be as rich if I continued to do it in Canada. So I end up doing it in the US.
So
And
wait, what
what
I'm
I
hearing you say is that in the US, you were able to find more evidence of women being oppressed on top of their lupus because they didn't have the money or the status or the good insurance to get the treatment that they needed.
or the
Is that
disability, the monthly disability income.
yes, yes. Oh, yes. The monthly disability income that a woman in another country might receive, like where you lived, a woman in the US would not receive.
And that is what I found. So how the question is, we're straying from it. How can we help? Because while I was doing this research, I was working as a therapist and I was managing lupus. So it
Mm.
was all these 3 full-time jobs. But how we can help, I find we can't write them a check, which would be nice, but we listen. That's what we do as therapists, and we validate. And that was most powerful for the women I work with. Before I did started my research, I joined uh, a support group in Washington, in Seattle area. For the simple reason is I wanted to sit among the women and hear their stories. I wanted to know what it was like to live with and manage systemic lupus, and when you have these other factors. So, so that was something that informed how I would deal with women in my practice and as I conducted my research. We have to listen to them, we have to validate, we have to believe their stories, because that's one of the things that a lot of newly diagnosed participants shared, that they were not believed.
Mm.
It's all in your head. And
Mhm.
because lupus is a disease with 1,000 faces, even for the person afflicted with lupus, you can feel when you wake up, this is all in my head. Yesterday I was completing a half marathon. Today I can't do anything. I can't think, I can't walk, I can't eat you know, and so it must be in my head. So what we can do is listen, validate. No, it's not in your head. You have a serious autoimmune based condition, which is difficult to manage, and you are doing the best you can.
So you named three things that people that either love or professionally work with people with lupus is to listen, validate, and believe. Is there more?
We are going to be a support system in terms of, employing all those. But yeah,
No, it is important because so many women have told me that they were not believed, that they were dismissed, which happens a lot in the medical system here. And you named that it's disproportionately affecting Black women. And so many Black women have come to me and said, they said I was a liar. They said I was confused. They said that I couldn't have possibly felt this degree of pain. And that validation and belief has been so critical to people's healing. Like that being believed opens the door to hope, and hope opens the door to healing.
yeah, definitely. And I think I'll just add that it's important to develop very strong boundaries around who you let into your story, because it's just adding on to not being believed. And friends do not always, well, friends, people, associates might not always know how to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to set boundaries around your time. Um, I always say I'm protecting my peace and preserving my sanity, and you just can't be in the space.
Yes.
And so that's very important to surround oneself with the people who know and understand what it means to show up.
Mm. So for those of us that love and care for a woman with this chronic illness, we have to listen, validate, believe, and support. And the person who is struggling, they have to do everything they can to protect their peace, because there's a correlation between the disruption, like the emotional inflammation impacts the physiological inflammation.
You are so correct. And the research supports that stressor, like there's a lot of stress. We go through stress in our life every day, and there's good stress and bad stress. But lupus, that is very challenging condition. It doesn't understand. It doesn't know how to differentiate stressors, because the disease, the main factor, major manifestation of disease is that your cells are confused and the body is fighting itself.
Mm.
So the body, yes, your body actually get up fighting itself on a daily basis, and your job is to help it to understand, this is not a bad thing. You don't have to fight me today. So how do we do that? We do that by creating like calming environment for ourselves, and just be very mindful of stressors.
So are there some practices that you recommend for women like the one who wrote us this note, so that when her body wakes her up and tells her, we're in danger, let's fight? Are there practices that she can do that can bring her back into balance?
So everybody, the disease affect everyone differently, as I say, but there are some basic things we can do. So my thing is, believe it or not, staying off social media. No, that's not a
Believe
popular.
you. That's not a not. I believe you.
It's not a popular statement to make, but staying off social media and not being a news junkie. So somebody observed, come into my house the other day, they say, I've never seen your television on. I say it's not plugged in.
Mm.
I
Ooh.
keep it in the
Not
house
plugged in.
because if if I want to watch a Netflix movie on a big screen one day, I would plug it in, but it's not plugged in. So a news junkie, you want to avoid taking in all that news. In fact, right now there's a lot going on. And if one can avoid that, because here's the thing about lupus that we still are trying to understand is why does the body respond to these salient stressors? Like we don't see them, but they're running in the background. And so a person without lupus may be watching the stressful news or listening to stress evoking events, and it does not affect them. But a person with lupus, the body start reacting before even they're digesting the information. And that is one of the challenge. So again, just staying away from the too much stressors, too much stimulus that has nothing to do with your peace. I do some things like, of course, I probably share that I took off after a very bad um, manifestation of lupus. I
Mm.
took off to live in a quiet place. And I go out and water my garden in the morning, plant around little things, move things around. But gardening has been very good for me if you have the space. And even if you don't have a backyard, you can do um, pot gardening, like balcony gardening. Because anything like digging in the dirt or something like that is soothing and stress reducing. I
So,
listen to music,
mm,
real music, and I take breaks. Taking breaks is so important because again, the disease doesn't let you know when you are stressed. It doesn't have a signal that say, hey, stressor is up here and I'm gonna just attack you. It just comes on and you just notice I'm so fatigued I can't get up. And that will happen whether or not you practice healthy living and a peaceful, incorporate a peaceful environment. But those are some of the things that I found have worked for me in keeping this stressor at bay, a stress that I cannot see often.
yeah. So it's not about the complete elimination of stressors or the complete elimination of symptoms. It's about shifting to a lifestyle where your sympathetic nervous system is not in overdrive.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
Because
that makes perfect sense.
with lupus, it's actually always going.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So with this woman's question, and I forgot her initials. I think they're AR. So AR's question, um, and her statement about finally walking away from the marriage in which she was physically abused and emotionally abused. Do you find in your have you did you find in your research that something like an invisible chronic illness like lupus can manifest itself after a woman gets away, or a man or anyone gets away from an abusive situation?
So I'm going to answer that in two parts. Um,
Sure.
this, I mean, as a researcher, we gather information and we analyze and we put it out there. So, the participant, as more than 50%, majority of my participants shared that they had something was traumatic, and a lot of them had relationship that they were either in or left. So what I can say, there's a strong correlation between difficult intimate relationship and the manifestation of lupus symptom. This second part, as I said, I was going to answer in two parts. So here comes
Hmm.
the second part, and I can say this because it's in my book. I was in a very difficult relationship that ended, and I had 2.5 years of custody battle. It's one of the most,
Mm,
one judge saying I hadn't seen any so difficult. And of
mm,
course, I believed that I was the parent to raise my children, so I did not back down. I eventually won custody and moved away. And this story is significant because before that, I had no symptoms of lupus. I
mm.
moved away, and the truck arrived with the furniture. I moved away to a province far away. I moved to Calgary, Alberta. And then the afternoon, I was great. We unpacked, we set up the kids' room. My children were very young. And
Mhm.
I sent them to play with the neighbor. And the next morning, I could
Mm,
only move my head from side to side. I was totally crippled.
mm.
And so, although this is how lupus, the onset of lupus happened for me. So, in answer to your question, although I cannot definitively say stepping out of that, it seemed like my body was just holding on, holding on, holding on with the stress. And then it was finally over. It said, and now I've served my purpose and I'm done. And
Yes.
so, yeah.
You know, what you just shared really hit me because that has happened to so many people that I have worked with. And last season, I had a woman, another friend from Saybrook, Michelle Lamassa Dawson, who practices something called recall healing. And what she said is that these illnesses manifest when we're out of the extreme acute danger. And she calls that the repair phase. And during the repair phase, that's sometimes when the symptoms show up. It's like your body was like, we ain't even got time to be sick right now. We sick. We're going to wait. And then when you get to safety, then the symptoms show up. And even as you're sharing it, it also reminded me of when my daughter, when she was a little girl, she drove my truck. I know that's a whole story. But I remember jumping in the truck and being tense and ready. And I didn't even know that I was hurt until my daughter was safe. And my whole body was like this. And then after she was safe, I looked down and all the skin on my leg was gone. It came back, but it was that tension. And sometimes we forget that there's a direct connection between what's happening here, what's happening here, and what's happening in our entire being. And that's why mind body medicine and integrative psychiatry is so important. You have the capacity because of your experience, your me research, your me search, your clinical practice, your education to ask people the right questions. To not you don't separate the mind from the body, from the spirit, from the heart. And that I think is so important. And so I appreciate you sharing from your heart that story, because that is what I think that the women that are writing these questions need to hear. You're not crazy. You finally you finally got to a place where you could take a nap and your body said, "Okay, now let me show you what's really going on as a result of this." It's wonderful to hear you say that. Thank you.
You're welcome. I might just add that it's very important that, as women, mostly as women, we are not taught to value what we know about our body. I remember when the Boston Women's Health Collective came out with our bodies ourselves, and everybody, all the feminists were going like, because it was
Mm,
the first time we had this manual that could help us, that we could go to, almost like the DSM, but it was on women's bodies. And to go to and look and say, hey, this is happening to me. It has happened to another woman. And that's why the collective was so powerful. And we know our stories, we know our bodies, and we know what's happening. And it's very important for us to listen to our bodies and honor that process. And even we might not have the medical term for it, we know something's wrong, and we need to slow down and listen and ask the questions. What's going on in my life? What's going on with me? What is my body telling me?
That's the question. And what is my body asking me to do differently? And I tell my clients, you can go see the medical doctor, and that's only going to heal a part of what ails you. Then you have to also address all the elements that contributed. And I think sometimes, like you said earlier, that people get this idea that it's imposed on us, that it's all in our heads. And of course, a part of it is in your head. This illness is impacting your mind, your capacity. But it doesn't mean that you caused it because of your thoughts. And sometimes I see women believing that they caused it because they had a quote unquote bad thought. And so what you're sharing is so important for women to recognize that all of you is engaged in the injury, and all of you has to be engaged in the healing.
You are so correct. And for the most part, sometimes we're not always granted the space to do that.
No, we are
Um,
not.
whether in our relationships or just in society in general, it's very difficult to not be believed and validated. I know I keep harping on that, but when those two things are happening or not happening, we don't have a safe space in which to even look at what's going on with us, with our bodies, and in our lives.
Yeah. So a part of what you're telling people is keep searching for a guide until you are believed.
Yeah, very important.
I think that's the best advice we can give this woman that had that question too. Keep searching for a guide until you're believed that your lupus is real, your pain is real, your emotional distress is real, and now your case for freedom from the guilt and the burden is also real.
Absolute sure. And I think I might add, although we didn't spend time looking at her exit strategy from our marriage, which she did talk about her children blaming her, and it's important to find a way to have self compassion and just do not just reject that blame because it's not yours. You
Yeah.
made the best decision to leave a relationship that was not serving you, that was harmful, that was hurting, and you do not need to carry that guilt and blame around because it's not yours. I always say just give it back, and it's hard. It's harder to do, but it's very important to find a way to start doing that slowly. You know, slowly saying, "I'm sorry, I can't listen to that." Well, if a child saying, or if you never left, you wouldn't have this struggle right now. You'd have someone to do this for you. Just said, "No, I'm not going to listen to that," without explanation, without apology. Just started giving it back.
Mm. I was also, when you shared that, I was thinking about at the beginning of our conversation, and you mentioned genetic predisposition to lupus, and that being something that is explored. One of the things that I do with women is we draw out our family line, our lineage, and I also look at whether they have an emotional disposition to being in a relationship that is abusive, and to help them look at that pattern. What is that pattern? How many women before you have done that? And to say, okay, now you've changed a pattern. Now we've changed the pattern so that my children, my daughters and my sons, don't repeat what I did. And I wonder if it would also help her to share that with her kids. It's not
It's so
ideational.
it's such an important piece of work. Um, when I turned 60, I decided to do that. Sounds bizarre, but I wrote a
Hey,
book.
it's never too late, honey.
I knew all along because I had live memory. I carried live memory. I'm one of those people with live memories. I knew all along that my early childhood experiences were the determining factor in how I did life. I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
I always go. I was always a survivor. I was always doing life, and I knew that. I didn't have to guess it. But then
Mm-hmm.
I decided to go into it. So I looked at my life. I wrote a book. It's called Outsider because I was an outsider in my family of origin and how
Mm.
that drove the way I did life. And I didn't want to just sit down and say, come here, family member one, two, three, let's talk about how this impact me. I didn't think that would be useful. And so for my own healing, I chose to go inside and I wrote. I collected my memories, some of it in journal and notes, and I wrote. And that is one of the most powerful thing I've done in my life. And so
Beautiful.
because when you're telling people your story and how their actions impact you, like telling your children or so, they have the opportunity to say to you, "No, I think you just conjure that memory up. It didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's not real." But when you write out your story, even if you don't publish a book, but you write it out, it is very empowering because you don't have to censor what's real and you don't have somebody pushing back at you to say, hey, that doesn't make sense to my earring, so therefore it doesn't make sense.
Mm.
So that is one of the most, if I was to give a bit of advice to do, is to go inside, write the story. I belong to a writing room right now where some women are just writing these stories that they're going to put together in a little book for their family. So you don't have to go out there to John Public, but they're doing it that way. And they are expressing how powerful that is for their physical, emotional, and psychological well being.
Yes. No, it is so important. And Monica, that's one of the many things that you and I have in common. We both write, we both tell our stories. We both over 60. I've been 60 for a whole week now, so I'm bragging. Um, but yeah, so I also do the same thing with my clients is I make everybody write. Put that pen to paper, activate that heart meridian, write it down, and even if no one sees it, you do. And there's a healing, a physiological healing that happens. Have you ever had people actually write to the lupus?
Yes, actually, when I had a couple clients in my practice that newly diagnosed, and I mean I remember going through the rage stage to why me, but I
Mhm.
would have them write to the disease because why
Mhm.
would it pick me? So I would that was a practice I encouraged. I thought I was the only one who did it. I thought it was bizarre,
No. No, I do it all the time. It's so powerful. Not only do I have them write to it, I have them turn it into a shape or a person or an animal so y'all can have a conversation. So when it shows up, when you feel that tingling in your fingertips, you can talk to it. And and I've also found that when they can talk to it, lupus will tell them, I'm here today because blah, blah, blah. And 3 weeks ago, you pushed yourself too far. I told you not to, I told you not to volunteer for this. I told you not to eat that. I told you to take a nap. You did none of those things. And now I'm here. I don't even want to be here right now, but I'm here because I need you to go lay down. And so people are able to have a relationship with their lupus through their imagination, but it's very powerful.
yes. Um, a caution though, just for me, is people who are managing lupus as a part of their daily living. um, believe that they have a lot of, strength and will, because you need that to live. And so sometimes you will talk nicely to the disease and it doesn't listen. And I would caution not to turn that in self blame. It's just what's unfolding for
Exactly.
that period in time. You are doing the best you can. And the disease is not being kind to you today. Just tell it off. You're
Right.
not being kind to me,
Absolutely.
but I'm going to get through this.
Sometimes you got to tell it off. You are right. And that's part of the relationship. Telling
Yes.
you off today, which they possibly did not know they could do before. So you have given this audience a lot of good information. I so appreciate you sharing your me search and your story and these gifts and what these women that are struggling need to do for themselves and often and also what those of us who love them and support them personally or professionally also need to do. And so before we pause, is there anything you want to share to the women, the men, the lovers, the friends that are going to listen to this conversation?
I say show up for the person you're supporting in your authentic self. If you're having a difficult time and you cannot support, don't shame them.
Yes.
Just don't shame the person, because people with invisible chronic illnesses carry a lot of burden, especially if they look great. Everybody says, well, you can't be sick because you look amazing. And so, if you can't show up and just understand when they say you invite someone, I can't make your party, I'm a bit tired, just respect the boundary. Just
Mm,
respect and show that you care, show that you understand. It is a very difficult condition to live with. And I always say, if I had an enemy, I wouldn't give them lupus.
mm,
So I just want you to remember that as you are living or be around someone with this horrible disease. Just remember, it's not something one would even pass on to their enemies if they had any.
mm.
So be
Absolutely
good, be the
important.
best you can, show up, and for the people whose lives is being upturned by lupus, you are doing the best you can by
Mm.
just being alive. It is a difficult disease.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Monica. And thank you all for listening. Thank you for showing up. And we pray that these questions, that these answers serve your heart. We are grateful. We look forward to seeing you soon. Peace and blessings.